Hello, welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel. This is week 3 of the Bernat blanket stitch along with our friends at JOANN.com. I am having such a great time teaching you all of these fun stitches in this knit along. I hope you're having a wonderful time as well. Why don't we go ahead and take a look at what colors we will use for this week's clue. We will be using colors B and C for this week's instructions. Along with these two colors, you need a good pair of scissors, a tape measure, and a stitch marker. Once you have your materials, go ahead and get that free pattern. I've put a link in the video description box right below this video, and while you're down there, smash that like button, as my kids say. Once you have the free pattern and your materials, be sure to grab your homework from the last 2 weeks, and we are ready to begin the vertical stripes pattern. At the end of last week's video, I told you that you needed to work this really great bobble stitch pattern until it measured 12 inches. What we will do this week is work a section of garter stitch here with color B, and then jump into these vertical stripes using B and C. These stripes are made by slipping stitches, so we're going to get a really great and dense fabric. We wrap up the week with some garter stitch on the top as well, so you already know how to finish this week's instructions, how to start this week's instructions. We just have to learn a little bit about the center bit here. By this point in the pattern, you should be very familiar with garter stitch and stockinette stitch, as well as the increases we have been using to increase our stitch count to get to the proper multiple, and the decreases we have been using to decrease our stitch count to get to the proper multiple for the garter stitch section. In this week's instructions, you are going to learn a new increase to go along with the knit front and back you've already learned, and a new decrease to go along with the knit two together you've already learned. On my swatch, I have already worked up the garter stitch section through row 6, and as I was working it up, I realized that there is an increase in there that I hadn't shown you yet. So I'm going to grab a separate swatch, and we're going to learn how to do the knit front, back, and front increase. Very similar to the purl front, back, and front increase we did when we did the bobbles, only this time we are doing it to actually increase our stitches and keep them that way. So let me show you how to do that. Row 6 of clue number 3 has you begin with a knit front and back. We're familiar with this particular increase because we've used it each week along the way. So we know how to do the knit front and back. You then would carry on and knit 2 stitches, and then knit front and back again. That section right there, the knit 2 stitches, knit front and back, you'll notice in the instructions it is in parentheses. That lets you know that that set of instructions need to be completed the number of times written outside of the parentheses. For this example, that's 12 times. So you would repeat the knit 2, knit front and back a total of 12 times. It's after that 12th time that we are introduced to a new increase. So I want to show you how to do that increase. After you've done the 12 times, you work a knit 1, and then we do a knit front, back, and front. So we knit to the front, we knit to the back of the same stitch, and then we knit to the front again. So we'll go back into the front leg of that same stitch, and then off. So we created 3 stitches where there was only 1. Then you would knit 1 stitch. You only work that particular section, the knit 1, knit front, back, and front, and then knit 1 time. And then you go back to where you'll see there are parentheses, and you will do a knit front and back, and then a knit 2. That set of instructions will be completed 12 times again. You would end the row with a knit front and back. Now, the great thing about a stitch along like this is not only am I showing you how to work these stitches, but if you follow along with these videos and read the pattern at the same time, you are going to be more proficient at reading patterns, which will help you for future projects that you're working on. So go ahead, take a minute and work through rows 1 through 6 on your blanket. It's all garter stitch, but on row 6, you are increasing your stitch count from 77 to 105 stitches. Why are we increasing to 105 stitches? Let me show you. Remember in previous weeks, I've talked about the stitch gauge for each section. This stitch gauge for this section has more stitches per inch than the previous sections. So it requires more stitches to equal the same width as weeks 1 and 2. That's why you need to have more stitches, okay? Once you get past row 6, that's when we jump into this pattern right here, which is the vertical stripes pattern. When we work the vertical stripes pattern, we will be working with 2 colors at the same time. And unlike week 2, we will actually carry up both colors as needed. We won't be cutting them as we work along, which will make it a little bit easier at the end when we don't have to weave in all of those ends, okay? So I am going to go ahead and get started with the first row of the vertical stripes pattern, and you can follow along with me. It's only a 4-row repeat. Super easy. All right, here I am. I have my 6 rows completed for this section. All my increases are done. I have the correct number of stitches that I need for the size I'm making. So let's jump in with row 1. Before we begin with row 1, we need to make sure we add a stitch marker to the edge of our work right there. That'll give us a place to measure our 6 inches as we work this section. We begin with a knit 2. So I will start off by knitting 2 stitches, and then we get to where we have the asterisk and it says slip 1 purlwise with yarn in back. So my yarn is in back. I'm going to go into the next stitch and slip it purlwise with my yarn in back, and then I will knit 1 stitch, slip 1 purlwise with yarn in back, and knit the next stitch. I will do this all the way down the row. I end the row with a knit 1 in the last stitch. I will turn my work, still using my color B. I carry on to row 2. We begin with a knit 1, bring the yarn between the needles to the front, purl 1, slip 1 with yarn in front, so I just go in as if to purl and slip it, purl the next stitch, slip 1, purl the next stitch, slip 1, purl the next stitch. You will do this all the way down the row and you will end with a knit 1. At the end of row 2, you will turn your work, and this is where we will introduce color C to the mix. So we will drop our color B and we will grab our color C. And just like before, I will go ahead and tie on my color C because I like it and it just makes me happy, so I'm doing it. And I will carry on with my color C in pattern. So we were on the 3rd row in the vertical stripes pattern. Oh, you guys, I need to hold my yarn in the opposite hand. I'm trying to make sure I do everything English style for you. So 3rd row with color C, we will knit 1, and this is our repeat. Notice there's an asterisk right here. So we knit 1, slip 1 purlwise with yarn in back, knit 1, slip 1 purlwise with yarn in back. So it's the same process. It's just we are slipping the stitches that we knit last time and we're knitting into the stitches that we slipped last time. At the end of the row, you should look like this, where you have the two colors and each color is separated by the other. So you'll see here I have pink, white, pink, white, pink, white, pink, white, so on and so forth, all the way down the row. I carry on with row 4, which is the end of my row repeat. So once I'm finished with row 4, we have already completed all of the repeats we need to know for this section. We start off row 4 with a knit 1, and you're going to find something really convenient about this row. Bring our yarn between our needles so that it's to the front, and we slip the next stitch. And notice the next stitch is the opposite color. And then you purl the next stitch, which is the same color. Slip the next stitch with yarn in front, purl the next stitch. Slip with yarn in front, purl. See how this works? When you finish the row, you still have every other stitch is a different color, but when we turn our work, we will begin to work those repeats. We will repeat the first through the 4th row, and we are going to begin to see some really lovely striping. So here I am at the end. I would drop my color C. Let me see, it's over here. My color C here. And I'd pick up my color B, and I would begin working down my row. And what you'll notice is we will knit the first stitch, and then we knit the second stitch, and then we jump into our slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1. So what you are going to notice as you get past these first 4 rows is that when you repeat these rows, you will end up slipping the opposite color than what you're using. So for rows 1 and 2, I will be using my white, but I will be slipping my pink. And for rows 3 and 4, I will be using my pink, but slipping my white. It makes it fairly easy and fairly fast. This section is rather quick. Let me go ahead and carry on with this stitch pattern to show you how this will look. We go back to row 1, which has us begin with a knit 2. So I knit 2 stitches. This is where I jump into pattern. I will slip a stitch as if to purl with my yarn in back and knit the next stitch. Slip as if to purl with my yarn in back and knit the next stitch. Slip as if to purl with yarn in back, knit the next stitch. See how I'm always slipping the opposite color and then knitting the same color. The same holds true when I go back to working with my color C. I will slip all of my color Bs and only knit my color Cs. Here's what it looks like after repeating rows 1 through 4 just one time. You can see I'm starting to get really nice vertical lines here, and the fabric is really dense, and that's because of those slip stitches that we are working every single row. You continue repeating rows 1 through 4 until this section measures 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Remember, we place that stitch marker at the point right there when we began, so that way you can take your tape measure and measure the 6 inches as necessary. Once you've reached the 6 inches, you go ahead and cut color C. We're no longer going to use that. Make sure you leave a nice long tail so we can weave that in. You will knit 1 row with color B, and on the following row, we are going to work decreases again. Remember, we increased out to get to the right stitch count. We're going to decrease down to get to the correct stitch count or stitch multiple for the garter stitch, 77 stitches. That's what we've been using all along. For the decreases, you already know how to do the knit 2 together. We learned how to do that. What you don't know how to do is the slip 1 purlwise, knit 2 together, pass slip stitch over. So I do want to show you how to do that one stitch, because that's the only new stitch you should need to learn at this point. Okay, so let me show you how to do that particular decrease. For those of you following along, I am on page 2 of the instructions, and I am right here on this second next row. We know how to do the knit 2 together, and we also know that whenever our instructions are inside parentheses, we're going to do that set of instructions the number of times outside of the parentheses. So we would do the knit two together a total of 12 times. It's this section right here that you don't know how to do. It's the knit one, slip one purlwise, knit two together, pass slip stitch over. Those 3 words right there, separated by, looks like they're commas, that is one decrease. So let me show you how to do that decrease. I'm going to use the same swatch I was using earlier for the increases. And when we do a slip one purlwise, it's just as it sounds. We're going to slip one purlwise. Okay, so I just slipped one over purlwise. Then I will knit 2 together. So I'm knitting 2 stitches together. We know how to do that. Now I'm going to pass the slip stitch over. So I come over here, I grab that slip stitch that I did, have it jump up and over that decrease I just completed. Okay, so I just eliminated the stitch that I slipped and one of the stitches in the knit 2 together. So I decreased 2 stitches and I've left with 1. I'm going to show you how to do that one more time. You slip one as if to purl, knit 2 together, grab the stitch that you slipped, have it jump up and over that knit 2 together, and you're left with 1 stitch. After you work that slip one purlwise, knit 2 together, pass slip stitch over, you're back to the knit 2 together, knit 2 stitches all the way down the row. At the end of that row, you follow along with the instructions where you're knitting, and that is where I will leave you for this week's instructions. It's pretty simple. You learned a couple things that are new, right? You learned a new increase, you learned a new decrease, you learned about slipping stitches, and we're going to just keep floating up those colors along the side every 2 rows. This is a lot of fun. I enjoy making this stitch pattern, and I hope you do too. I hope you are enjoying this knit along as much as I am enjoying teaching you along the way. It is so much fun to see all of your works in progress that you're sharing on social media. Thank you for doing that. It is a true joy to see it all happening. If you have not shared yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. Use hashtag MarleyBird or hashtag handmade with JOANN so that way we can find your projects, leave a little comment, and smash your like button. I will see you next week with another fun-filled pattern extravaganza right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. I'm Marley Bird. This is the Bernat Blanket Stitch Along with JOANN. Talk to you later. Bye, guys.